They can afford higher levels of planning. And those of us who are building our fortunes and collecting our assets and working up and skinning our knees and trying to raise our families, we need it more than they do, to tell you the truth. Because if we lose what we got, many of us lose everything. And it so impresses me that a number of people who are real estate owners are pretty darn good business people. They're savvy investors. They're good negotiators. They know what their strengths and weaknesses are. But I'm always a bit concerned that so many of them are sole proprietors. That means that they own the real estate in their own name, not in the name of an LLC or not in the name of a corporation. So I want to share with you a couple of entities talking about trusts, partnerships, corporations, and limited liability companies. I want to share those ideas with you strictly from a real estate investor's perspective. Basically, there's four types of assets that I'm talking about here. Business entities, real estate holdings, which is what we're most interested in, other investments, which I believe we should all have some, mutual funds, option accounts, things like that, that we should be continually educating ourselves on and learning about those. And also our retirement and insurance. A lot of times we take retirement and insurance sort of for granted. And one of the things I always love to do is to help educate people about taking their retirement program, making it a self-directed retirement program, and then investing in real estate through that. I had a client from a course that I taught here in Las Vegas about a year ago, and the gentleman shared with me that he had followed my advice from a previous seminar and got to know a number of the other students. And one of the other students and he began to invest together as joint ventures. Something I appreciate, Charles, you bringing up joint ventures. I believe in that in the real estate area. And they started doing joint ventures where they would buy a property, they'd get the money from the bank, they'd buy the property, and they'd also borrow the money to do the fix-up. Well, after they had done a number of these and they pretty well had their system down, one of the things that they found from my 3-day workshop is that they could use a self-directed retirement program, whether it was a 401k or a self-directed IRA, and they could begin molding that into their programs. Now, because of the rules about self-dealing and being in relationships or being in business relationships with relatives, it was interesting to find out that there are certain kinds of persons that are not disqualified. Those who are not blood relatives, and while you can't enter into a deal with, say, husband and wife or parent and child, you certainly can do things with siblings like your brothers and sisters and so forth. So these two gentlemen started going to the banks that they had used before to get acquisition money for the property, but now they were going to each other's IRA to borrow the money to do the fix-up. And they had had pretty good success. As they started closing out these deals and selling those property, they would pay back the bank the loan for the acquisition. They'd pay back each other's IRA for the fix-up costs. And later on, they started giving the IRA kind of a bonus. They would give it a third of the deal. And they had some pretty good deals going on there, and they said that if they just kept this up, they thought that at about 18 months from now, which should be in another 6 months, they would be in a position to where they wouldn't even have to go to the bank to get the acquisition money. They would essentially be using each other's retirement accounts as the bank. Kind of cool. So there's a lot of things that we can do, and retirement planning is an area that's ripe for opportunity for us as real estate investors. Now, every few seconds in the United States, there's another lawsuit. While I've been talking to you, there have been several dozen people served with lawsuits. And it's sad to see how many there are. Here in Nevada alone, there's about 200,000 lawsuits a year. Half of those are probably divorces. I'm sure Britney Spears, has driven through the divorce lawyer drive-through cycle a couple of times here. I don't know. But there's another lawsuit filed every few seconds. In fact, here in the United States, we're home to 94% of all the lawsuits in the world, the entire world. Now, part of that's a system that we have, and part of that is that we are very different from outside the United States. When I was studying for the Bar of England and Wales, I was very pleased to find out that in countries outside the United States, if you're going to sue somebody, you have to put up a cash bond to cover their defense costs in case your lawsuit is frivolous and doesn't have merit. And that would probably cut down about, what, 2/3 of them in the United States probably? There's a lot of greedy people out there who have figured out that if they can sue you and put you in a spot where you are on the defensive, pretty soon it's not the principle of the thing, it's not who's right or wrong, it's which of you gets tired first of spending money and then steps up and goes, you know what, what's it going to take monetary-wise to make this go away? Most of these lawsuits are settled out. Probably about 85% to 90% of the lawsuits out there are settled out. The problem is it's usually settled out on the plaintiff's terms. And if you have asset protection in place, then you have much more of a level playing field, and now we can settle those cases out on our terms, which is much more favorable than it would have been. I had a lawsuit, my wife and I had a lawsuit with a with a tenant years ago, and we had our asset protection in place, and we were able to settle that thing out for a couple of $1,000s just to make it go away. And it didn't hurt that I also threatened them that I was going to countersue for fraud for 10 times the amount that they sued us for. Now, the lawsuit that they originally won, it was around $85,000. It was not meritorious. It was one of those nuisance suits, you know, where they bite you on the ankles until you're tired of it and you pay them to go away. But I figured that we could settle this thing for far less than what they wanted, so we threatened to countersue them for fraud. We gave them a number that was 10 times greater than their number against us. We told them that we had our asset protection in place for many years before they came along, and that they were not going to get a dime from us if we lost the lawsuit, because we don't own anything, but we control a lot. Big difference when you have ownership versus control. So that's one of the basic concepts. There's about 4 basic concepts to consider here. And one of those is that concept of ownership versus control. Because if I own a lot of things in my personal name, I can lose them. They can be taken away through a divorce. They can be taken away by estate taxes. My father's estate, our uncle, Sam, he got 60%. Just from bad planning on my dad's part. If my dad had done one simple thing, which is to own his life insurance inside of an irrevocable life insurance trust outside of his estate, my brothers and I could have collected that cash, tax-free, and used it to pay the estate taxes on my father's estate, and we would not have been forced to sell all those properties that my father had acquired since the 1950s just to pay the estate taxes. Now, for years after that happened, I was bitter and angry about it. I drove around Southern California, and I would point out to my wife different properties that my dad used to own. And Dave, you know my wife, Ann. You know how she is. One day she looked at me and she said, "Just get over it." Get over it already. Learn a lesson. Don't let that happen to us or any of your clients. And I have dedicated my